Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Catherine O'Day, Executive Director of Save Our Shores. We're an ocean conservation nonprofit based in Santa Cruz, California, with a mission to steward clean shores, healthy habitats, and living waters to foster a thriving marine ecosystem. I have with me today Chairman Valentin Lopez, leader of the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, which is one of 3 historic tribes that are recognized as the Ohlone. Chairman Lopez is also president of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. And joining Chairman Lopez today are 2 youth members of the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, Alexi Sigona, who is currently a PhD student in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management at the University of California in Berkeley, California, and serves as a tribal steward. And Stephen Pratt is an undergraduate at Cabrillo College working on plankton research, and he's a very active member of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust Native Stewardship Corps. And Chairman Lopez, Stewart Sigona, and Pratt, welcome, and I'm very happy to have you here today. So let's start with a bit of background. The Amah Mutsun Tribal Band has a very tragic history of disenfranchisement and displacement as the result of 3 periods of colonization. Could you briefly share some of that history with us?
Yes, Catherine, thank you very much. And thank you all for watching this video. We appreciate that.
My name is Valentin Lopez, and I'm the chair of the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. Our tribe is comprised of the descendants of the indigenous peoples that were taken to Mission San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz in the central coast of California. Our history, a lot of people want to start our history with the mission period, but that's not when our history started. Our history started 12, 14, 15,000 years ago. Our creation story tells us that Creator very specifically picked our people to live on our lands and gave each tribe, defined each tribe's territory. And then Creator gave us the responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things within our territory. And that right there is a very sacred obligation and a very sacred covenant that we have with Creator. We have the responsibility to take care of the fish, the birds, all wildlife, to take care of the oceans, the coastline, all the plants, the moon, the stars, the skies, the rocks, and etc. So we took that obligation very seriously. The true history of California Indians has never been told. As I said, we were first brutalized by the California missions in Spain. Then came the mission period, and it was the same with them. And then the American period. All 3 periods thought that wanted to destroy and dominate our spirituality, our culture, our environments, and our indigenous knowledge and our humanity. And they removed us from the lands, and they enslaved us. Under the United States period, the governor of California in the very first State of the Union said that there will be a war of extermination against the California Indians, and that is to be expected. Then they passed one of the very first bonds, treasury bonds passed by the state of California, was to pay for the extermination of California Indians. And then with that bond money, they paid bounty money to kill Indians, and they paid militias to go out and search and find the Indians and to kill them. That was just the start of it. It was very brutal. And so at the turn of the century, our population, the Native American population in California had been reduced by over 96%. Our tribe, the survival rate, during that period of time was less than 96%. Well, you can look at it as more than 96%. And following the turn of the century, our people learned to live underground, to not go into public, to not subject themselves to the hatred and discrimination that existed during that time. And in 2012, we developed a nonprofit 501c3, the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. For that reason, the purposes of our land trust, the goals of our land trust are to preserve and protect the few remaining archaeological and cultural sites that continue to exist, to do research, to do education of our tribal members, and education of the public as well. And then finally, to develop a stewardship course so we can return to the practice of taking care of Mother Earth and all living things. And that's what we do today.
Wow, that's an amazing story, Chairman. It sounds as though some tribal traditions and practices have been lost over those many decades of slavery and brutality and rape and genocide. Today, you're working to restore those traditions and best practices for caring for Mother Earth. How is that work going?
It's going very well. To restore that knowledge, that indigenous knowledge, it is very difficult. But we have a 4 or 5 prong approach to doing that. First, we talk to our elders to document the knowledge that they retained or that they learned, that may have survived or they may have picked up from other tribes. So we document that knowledge. And then we talk to our neighboring tribes to see what they remember and what were the important food plants and the medicine plants, basketry plants, etc. What was their diet? You know, what were what ceremonies do they hold, etc. And then we do research. We do research with Berkeley and Stanford and UC Santa Cruz and other universities as well. And a lot of that right there is to learn what landscapes looked like, because the archaeologists can tell you what plants were growing 500 or 1,000 years ago on a particular landscape. And what we wanted to do is we want to restore the landscapes to their pre-contact conditions. So now we work hard to restore the native plants back to those landscapes, and also like in the creeks and rivers to bring the fish, the wildlife back, and or develop the environments that will allow those fish to be restored. And that work is going very well. So that research is important, but perhaps the most important thing is our last traditional leader was Ascension Solorzano. And by the way, Stephen is a descendant of Ascension Solorzano, so we're very happy to have him and many of the members of that lineage in our as leaders in our tribe. And Ascension Solorzano, she was a very active woman and a very knowledgeable woman. She had a near-death experience at age 6, and she was recognized then as a healer, and her formal training started at age 11. And then she started assuming the leadership role, and as the leader of the Amah Mutsun, she learned our ceremonies, our songs, our methods of taking care of lands, of plants, of animals, of fish, etc. And then just before the turn of the century in 1900, she had a dream or a vision that somebody was going to come and talk to her. And she needed to tell that person everything she knew. So she waited and nobody came by. And then in 1929, she was diagnosed with cancer. And so she went home to prepare to pass on. And shortly after that, in a matter of a week or two, there was a knock on her door. And she opens the door, and there's a small framed man with his hat in his hand and wearing a suit. And she opens the door and she sees him and she lights up. She goes, "There you are. I've been waiting for you. Please come in." That person was J.P. Harrington. He was an ethnohistorian from the Smithsonian Institute. And he had been sent out here to capture as much of the stories of the Native Americans of the elders as he could, because they know that they were quickly dying away. Harrington quickly moved in to Ascension's house and lived in the basement. And every morning they wake up early and start to write, and they would work all day long and until the evening. Ascension didn't take the pain medication because it would cloud her memory, and she didn't want that. But she had her native medicines, and she would take that for pain. And when she passed away 5-6 months later, in that period of time, they had written or documented over 76,000 pages of anthropological field notes. And it's those field notes that are going to allow us to restore 90 to 95% of our indigenous knowledge and return to the path of our ancestors so that we can take care of Mother Earth and all living things, including the oceans and the coastline and the fish and the sea mammals and the seaweed, etc.
Wow, it's an amazing story. And you're a great storyteller, Chairman. So can you tell us a little bit more about the land trust?
Yeah, so when you think of a land trust, you definitely think about land acquisition and holding these conservation easements. And traditionally, a lot of these land trust models are about preservation and not really about that stewardship, which we think is really important for us. So, as a Native American community entering into the land trust model, it was definitely a bit different for us in our method of having a land trust. For example, we don't own any 1 inch of our traditional territory, but we have the obligation from Creator to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. And so what our land trust enables us to do is to enact that stewardship. And it was formed as a container for our relearning and returning to stewarding the land like our ancestors. And the work centers around research and education, conservation, restoration, and stewardship. For me and other youth, we've had the opportunities to really access our traditional territories and learn these cultural practices through the land trust. And it's definitely been something that's been really important to me these past few years. And just for more information, I know we don't have much time here, but amahmutsunlandtrust.org really talks about our different projects going on, and it is really important. So if people could check that out, that would be great.
Thank you. And where do you think your research and exploration around the tribe's ocean stewardship traditions and practices will lead? What are your hopes and expectations in that area?
Thank you for asking. So I feel there's a lot to look forward to with our work with the ocean. We've learned a lot from the research done with UC Berkeley and state parks, as Chairman Lopez mentioned. And now we're thinking of what else we can do to learn and apply that knowledge to Indigenous stewardship to the ocean. The archaeological research that our tribe did with UC Berkeley and state parks was done at Wilder Ranch in Santa Cruz. And this was just one moment where we were working with them. And it was for a session for about 2 summers and 6-week sessions. There we were sampling surface samples where you just take a little bit off the top of the soil, and then you take that soil and you push it through a screen and you look for artifacts through that. And so we were able to find remains of shellfish, sea mammals, and other larger fish that were used by our people, or at least the native people at Wilder Ranch. So this helped provide us with information of the animals that were here and that our tribes were utilizing. But on top of that, an archaeologist named Gabriel Sanchez was curious about our work with smaller fish. So he made it a point to focus and look for those smaller bones of the smaller fish because they would fall through the screen. So it's kind of difficult to find those if they fell through. So he made it a point, and he actually found an abundance of bones of herring, sardines, and anchovies. And so that helped give us a really good glimpse as to other fish that our tribe was utilizing. And so he was also supported by Mike Rowan, who studies seaweeds, and they are kind of a team, and he helps us to learn about the seaweeds that our tribe used as well. And so archaeology really has been a useful tool for us into learning our past, and because it gives us a really deep look into the past. We're really grateful to have those relationships with these archaeologists. And of course, as Chairman Lopez was saying, due to colonization, passing on ecological knowledge was disrupted. So we don't really have a lot of that knowledge that's been passed down fully. The collaboration helps us to bridge that gap that was taken away. And this archaeological research started in about 2007. And it's taught us a tremendous amount of what cultural resources have been here before first contact. And learning about that has helped shape our stewardship projects and our future ones. So understanding the ocean composition, or the composition of the ocean, and our ancestors' relationship to it in the past helps us shape our restoration goals and monitoring objectives today. And so currently we are working towards a successful approach to collaborative research and land stewardship and applying it to the ocean. And we're working with Cabrillo College and in a plankton monitoring program. And this program is led by Nicole Crane, and it's under the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So we get a certificate in the end to allow us to be plankton monitors, and it's a citizen science program. And through this program, we go to the different wharfs in Santa Cruz County and pull samples of plankton. And these samples help us to see the conditions of the water and help us to understand what's going on due to temperature rise and other conditions like nutrification. And so it also gives us a glimpse at harmful algal blooms, and we get to learn about those, which in stories of our tribe, we have documented harmful algal blooms and knowing when and when not to eat shellfish. So it's a very incredible work, what we're doing and what we're aiming to do. So we do a lot of land restoration right now, but we know that ocean involvement is in our future very soon. And I see our stewardship expanding by doing both land and ocean stewardship, like among each other. So one specific other project that we really want to be involved with is kelp forest restoration. And we know that if we can be involved, especially with our area of the coast that we all share, then we feel we can make a difference with that as well. And ultimately, these plans and steps will help us become confident stewards of the land and ocean. And that's really what our goal is.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And so obviously, Stephen, you're a tribal youth engaged in these activities. Um, how are you engaging other tribal youth in the efforts, and how are they responding?
Well, the first step was getting our land trust involved with Cabrillo. But for people who are younger, I've been mostly talking with them. We have a summer camp for our tribal youth every summer. And I brought my marine biology textbook with me last time, and just to talk about different things in the ocean with the students, excuse me, the youth. And I feel like they were very engaged to it. So I feel, to kind of reiterate, is just having the education. It really opens up people's eyes and it gets people engaged.
And just to add on top of that, Stephen's talking about this education being so important for our youth, and I definitely agree. And one thing about this education is our relationships with our land is part of our education, and we don't have 1 inch of our traditional territory. And on top of that, most of our tribal members don't even live within our traditional territory. So that education also starts with just being on our lands, and having those relationships, because, as Indigenous peoples, we believe that these areas have our relatives, and these are our relatives in the land, in the oceans, and everywhere around us. And so just rebuilding those relationships and revitalizing those relationships with our relatives is really important, and is a form of education as well. And so I think that our youth camp, which happens every summer, which is the Amah Mutsun Land Trust Coastal Stewardship Summer Camp, is really important for our youth, many who live in Fresno and in the Central Valley, to get out to the coast and rebuild those relationships and to start feeling comfortable out there. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, great. So we're very limited on time today. I'm really sorry to say. I think we could have a conversation for hours with everything that's going on, and from your history to what you're currently relearning and sharing. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share and that you think it's important for our audience today to hear about what you're doing and what you're working on?
Well, a couple of important things to know is that our most sacred site is Uristock, and that's in Gilroy. And that's under threat now by sand and gravel mining. And so we would like people to become aware of that and see if they can find ways to support it. And you can find Uristock at protecturistock, JURISTAC.org, and they can learn more about that. But one thing that we have no doubt about is if we're going to heal or survive climate change, that effort must be Indigenous led. And we're working very hard now to teach our people to be leaders in that area. Our people have studied these lands for 12, 14,000 years, and we're the only ones that can say we have moral authority to speak for these lands. And that is very important. To our ancestors, what made a person valuable and important and recognized as being rich was not what you see today in the terms of monetary or material goods or possessions or etc. There was 2 things that were most important to our ancestors to determine a person's value and importance and riches. Did that person have the knowledge of the ancestors of how to take care of the condor, how to take care of the rivers, how to take care of the fish, and be able to use fire as a mechanism to control the landscapes, to make sure the plants are well taken care of, and to keep the catastrophic buildup of those big fires, etc. And then the second quality that was important for value and importance was relationships. Did you have good relationships within your family, within your tribe, with neighboring tribes, with the animals, with the landscapes, with the 4 seasons? Did you have relationships with them? And most importantly, did you have relationships with Creator? That's what our tribe is working hard now to get back to, and to teach our members that that's the path that we must return to. Our tribe is working hard to return to the path of our ancestors so that we can fulfill our sacred obligation to Creator. And that's what we're working on very hard right now. And if you'd like to learn more about our land trust, or sign up for our newsletter, or sign up to become a volunteer with our land trust, you can go to www.amahmutsunlandtrust.org. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Chairman Lopez, Lexi, and Stephen. It's very clear to me, someone who's been working in the environmental arena and conservation for 27 years, we have so much to learn from people, our Indigenous people, and it's so refreshing and so exciting to hear about your traditions and hear how nature was so much a part of who you are. Obviously, we wish you great success on this journey that you've undertaken. And it seems to me you are really, really living the meaning and purpose of Earth Day. And so it's been so fortunate for us to be able to have you with us on this 50th anniversary of Earth Day, to share what you're doing, both to steward our terrestrial and our in our ocean, our marine resources. So grateful to have you. Thank you so very much. Take care now.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.